Thank you, Dr. Young, and to Mr. Stanford, Mr. Goldsmith, but he's gone. He must probably hears me enough. To Simon Bridges, it's nice to actually see photos of you actually working at those trips. At the board meetings, we do wonder if you actually do much of that, but of course, the real person that runs the commerce is actually Janelle, who's with us here today. So Janelle's Simon's EA, and it's nice to have her here as well. So to you, ladies and gentlemen, warm welcome. Yes, 2021 was a wonderful night talking to you in the inauguration dinner. Today I'm just sort of going to reflect over the last few years of where real estate's been. I want to look at the interest rates versus OCR, give you a bit of a global perspective of what's happening in the world, and then where to from here, and that's the the million-dollar question. A little bit about affordable homes, foreign buyers, and I'm sure one minister is looking forward to that. Predictions on the year and beyond. And I've just added on to my list because I know there's a large number of building constructors here. I also want to talk about building consents. But just a little bit about who I am. A lot has been said already. That I did start in 1981. If you add your maths up, that's 45 years that I've just served in the company, and I'm only 46. But it's people say to me, why so long, and do you still enjoy it? I wouldn't be in this role if I didn't enjoy it, because it's one of the most interesting and enjoyable industries anyone can have. To me, I still remember the day I made my very first sale in Manurewa for $29,000. Nowadays, when I went by that house 2 weeks ago with my youngest daughter, it's on the market for $1,022,000. And that's how much prices have moved up. But I look at real estate, when I look at our company, we were founded in 1923. And people talk about the market and the collapse and the rises and everything like that. I would have to say that when a company has gone through the Depression, World Wars, through many recent events like COVID, global financial crash, real estate always bounces back, and we're going to start seeing that happen over the next few months. And my outlook for the future, without giving you away the answer to the very last question I have today, is that I think we're in for some good times, but I do say that with a word of caution. Our company is the third generation. I'm currently the managing director, and there's Stephen Bartlett, fellow director. We've got Henry Bartlett, who's a manager over at Milford, and the fourth generation are also working in the company, and the fifth generation have just been born. And so we're a company that is in this industry for a long time. With my role, I do travel overseas a lot, and I'll talk about that a little bit as we get into the presentation. But the thing with going overseas is when you come home, it makes you appreciate what we have here in New Zealand. We don't know how lucky we are where we are. And it makes me more prouder to be an Aucklander, serving in Auckland, to make sure we do the best for Auckland, because we are one of the best cities in the world. And I just think we always underestimate that and always look for faults when we don't actually look for the positives. And I just say to you, there's many of positives in what the government are doing at the moment, the changes that they're implementing, but more importantly, what the council are doing as well for our city, but what our building industry are doing for us, what our workers are doing for us in day-to-day jobs. We've got a wonderful city that we underestimate where we're at. But in Thompson, we're truly an Auckland company, but people say to me, why have we not spread throughout New Zealand? When we do the surveys, most people think we are throughout New Zealand, but ultimately we're Northland, Auckland, with with 88 branches, and just more recently we've expanded into Tauranga, and we own half of Lodge Real Estate in Hamilton. Why did we expand? I suppose it was after the Christchurch earthquakes. We're looking at the real estate companies down there that had to fold or have taken a long time to recover because they lost all their opportunity. You know, houses destroyed, it took a long time for the rebuilds, etc. And as my CEO at the time, or current CEO, Chris Dobby, said to me, he said, Peter, what happens if we had a major disaster in Auckland? What would happen to our company? And our company is all based in Auckland. So that's why we've now started to spread. Will we spread any further? I can't answer that. But you know, many people have offered to run offices down in Queenstown and Wanaka. And I said, no, if anyone opens up down there, it'll be me. But certainly we have been looking at possibly Wellington, because the more we're closer, especially into the commercial sector of our business with the politicians, it will certainly make our role a little bit more compatible. But our main focus is here in Auckland and the immediate areas around that, the Golden Triangle. What I want to do is just talk about where we've been, and I would have to say that the last 2 years in particular have most probably been the two hardest years other than 1987, and that was one of the big when the share market crashed. But when I look back at 2021, I've forgotten about the integration dinner, but when we met in 2021, it was most probably just after the COVID. And if you remember COVID, after COVID, house prices went absolutely stupid, and I'll show you that in a minute. The number of properties on the market were very limited, 3,394. We sold 13,428 properties, and the average data took 28. Those other figures are quite significant. You'll see the number of percentages of options was 76. When I look at 2025, where we are today, this is really exciting. And I say that with sincerity because we now have more houses on our market. There's more opportunity for our purchasers to buy. We're still down in numbers, but you'll see shortly how it compares. But you'll see that only 55% of our properties sell under option. What you don't see on this is 2023 and 24. In 2024, we had roughly the same number of properties on the market, but we sold under 9,000 properties. We had 58 days on average to sell, and the 35% of the properties sold under option. So if we just have a look at those two statistics, you can see quite a significant change over those 2 years. This is what we do is, I love statistics, because statistics do not lie. And the significant thing here is, especially for the first part of 2025, is each month is well ahead of 2024. And that's positive. We're on the move. I can tell you on Monday, the press release is just going out for our April figures. 984 properties were sold in April. Down on March, and I'll talk about that in a minute. But if you have a look, there's only 2021, which was the exceptional year, and 2015, that was probably the last biggest year we had prior to COVID. When we look at the weekly sales, now again, we keep a list of our weekly sales. These are sales that have been written up by our salespeople. And I welcome the number of salespeople that are in our room here today. But the point I want to just point here is, if we go back to 2020, you'll see right down the bottom how it dropped down to 66, 76, and that was the start of COVID. When we have a look under the current year, under the number 15, you'll see number 14 is 340. If we just go above that, 340, 332, 346, 340. First one, number 15, dropped down to 295. Does anyone know what that was? Donald Trump. Seriously, that's what it is. And what I'm showing here is we just need little incidents like COVID, like the tariff announcement, how it does slow down real estate. It gives uncertainty to the market, people not sure what they're going to do. But I think the significant thing here, though, is how quick it can rebound. Yes, everyone was worried about the tariffs and still are worried about the tariffs, and I think everyone's worried about Mr. Trump. But when we look at those figures, real estate will come back. And that, again, is what my positive message is. We've really got a positive scene that we're moving forward where we're going. Unfortunately, I don't really want to show you the COVID figures because it really makes me wild why we were in lockdown for so long and how that had a major impact on Auckland, not necessarily the country, but especially here in Auckland, how it affected not only real estate, but every business that is based in Auckland. You'll see here just the average sale prices, and again, not significant except that bottom line. You'll see the 3 months that we've already had from January to March, the average is 1.1. But what really annoys me is the media comments. And I apologise to any of the media that are here today. Channel 33 exception, they do a wonderful job for us. But when I look at some of the media statements, month by month, they're saying, oh, the market's changed by 20% or house prices have fallen by 15%. When you actually look at the averages, I always make sure I talk about a whole year, and I'll show you why in a minute. Between this last year and this year, the average sale price in Auckland rose by 1.2%. Hardly at all. And the median average price dropped by 0.9%. If you listen to the media, it's 20, 30%, and etc. This is the reason. And you don't need to look at the charts or the figures, but just look at the picture and the lines. We always have a big upmarch when it's our busiest month of the year. And that's because Christmas is there, January. No one works through Christmas. They come back. The first lot of sales are generally in February. They settle in March. And we always have an uprise. Also, March is one of the best months for selling, especially the high-priced properties. You know, pools, tennis courts, the trees look so much lovely in the beautiful summer sun that sometimes we get. But then when we go through to the middle of the year, you'll see how they drop down. It's winter. Sports events are on. Kids have got off to their morning sports. Test matches are on. It does have a major impact. And then you'll see towards the end of the year, October, November, we get a sharp increase again. And that's again coming into that Christmas period, and prices tend to go up and the sale numbers go up. So it's more a cyclical pattern that we have rather than what the media will tell us. This is something that was given to me a few years ago, and I've been tracking it, and it is still to line. And the important one here is actually the peak line, because these are the next pensioners. These are the people that are going into retirement village era, or that sort of type of property. And what we're seeing now is, 2028 is that if you have a look at that quite a sharp increase, we're expecting a lot more people of the sort of the 60 to 64 age bracket needing to sell their properties and move into retirement villages or some investment properties along those lines. The population growth of Auckland, again, this was put out about a couple of years ago, but we've already just hit the $2 million, 2 million people. And, well, it's almost hit it, coming up to about $2 million. But, we've actually hit that before the 2028 target. So, are we on the high projection? Are we on the medium projection? We're definitely not going to be on the low projection. And if the Minister opens up the immigration a little bit more, I'm sure that we will see that maybe the medium is where we would be looking at, because we want to make sure that the infrastructure is actually built at the same time as any future building. This is one that I really love. People ask me about real estate. I've got statistics right back to 1954, and the main part here is if you took out the 2021, the real sharp line there, and if we just sort of took a line that just goes up, real estate is always going up. Yes, there's the little drops, and that's because of the market. And I think we'll always have real high-rise increases, but there will be the odd time when it is starting to show that we do need. But you'll see that over the last, say, 10 years, the down drops have been quite significant, mainly because of the COVID false figures, but also I think prices aren't going to rise as much at the same rate as they have over the last 60, 70 years. So what's happening to the rental market? You know, rentals is becoming big. I look at Auckland, but I'll use London as an example. 10 years ago I was over in London and 30% of the people were renting, 70% were owning. I went over 2 years ago and it was the exact opposite. It was 70% people were renting and 30% were buying. And Auckland is now actually sort of going much the same direction. The cost of living, the cost of affordable housing is making people rent more properties. If we have a look at the average rental price for 3-bedroom properties, you know, you'll see that all those bedroom levels are all risen right by about 3% year on year. More importantly, when we look at over 5 years, and this is a concern that I have, especially for the Minister, is if we look at what the average rental is for a 3-bedroom house, it's risen by 19%. People talk about the real estate average sale price, but the rental price has gone up a lot more than what the sale price is. And it's something that we do need to be very aware of. Interest rates and OCR, and I've just used the interest rates on a 5-year loan. They're all roughly the same. But when we look at 2019, at that stage it was 4.45 and the OCR rate was 1. You'll see the movement that it's gone. It sort of came down to the bottom around about April 2021, and then most probably peaked in January 2023. And I think what we'll see is, you know, from with basically around about a 3% swing in the interest rates, yet with the OCR we've gone right down from a 5.25 right down to 3.5. So that's what I'm saying here is the OCR rate is coming down quicker than the interest rates. To me, I hope there's no one from the banking institutions here, you're rorting us. You know, when an interest rate goes up, you're very quick at putting the rates up almost immediately. But when they come down, no, you have to wait until you're fixed term. And I believe that we need to look at somehow making sure that the banks actually start reducing those rates quicker, because as a country we need to get more cash flow back into the average ma and pa, the first home buyers, into business, and make sure that the cash flow starts increasing. And I think that, you know, there needs to be some way that we talk with the bank. You know, they make millions, and to me, that would be one way that they would be helping New Zealanders. I know the Kiwi Bank, and I'm not with the Kiwi Bank, but I congratulate them because they have moved a lot quicker than those other banks. They just seem to be owned by Australian banks, and they're having the same problem over there. So that's my thoughts on the interest rates. I do believe by the end of this year, our interest rates will be down to maybe 4.8, something like that. That's my prediction. I may be a little bit optimistic, but we're not sure what's going to happen with Mr. Trump and what happens worldwide, but he does play a major part in some of these decisions. But I'd like to think that we'll be down just below the 5% by the end of this year, which will give a lot more money back into the economy. The other thing that I have heard and spoken to the banks is most of the fixed term loans will be coming off around about September, October this year. So there should be a lot more cash flow coming into the system around that time. Part of Peter Thompson, we're members of leading real estate companies of the world. And to be in that group, you have to be invited. And there's something like 170 companies worldwide. And one of the best things about it is you attend a conference every year in Las Vegas, and then we always go to Europe for a symposium in September. But the lady there, Dr. Marcy Russell, is one of the highest respected economists in the US, and she's also aligned to leading real estate companies of the world. And she just recently put out a newsletter and did a webinar for us, and she basically said that her 5 major economic insights for the month of March were the market volatility. And I'm just going to read just some of the information because it just gives us an insight to where we're going. The US financial markets have experienced one of the most volatile periods in history, with significant declines in major indices like the S&P 500, NASDAQ and Dow Jones. The rapid decline has led to comparisons with historical events such as the Lehman Brothers collapse in 2008-2009. The uncertainty surrounding tariffs and their macroeconomic effects is causing companies to delay investments, contributing to market instability. If the financial conditions remain today for the next 6 months to a year, Dr. Russell sees high likelihood of a recession 6 months from now. It just shows what one single person and maybe his contributors can actually control a country like that, but it also has a major effect on worldwide. The tariff landscape and global implications. The current tariff regime is reshaping global supply chains. Historically, tariffs have had significant geopolitical impacts, as seen during the Great Depression. The current situation could lead to similar unintended consequences, affecting global economic order and potentially benefiting countries like India, which has managed to stay on a line. I'll skip through a few of them because I'm conscious of time, but the housing market trend and consumer is an interesting one. A recent report indicates that 1 in 4 Americans are scrapping plans for home buying due to current uncertainty. Say no more. Now, to us New Zealanders, we look at those sort of comments and you think, wow, where are we going? But again, I can assure you is one thing with the COVID is that real estate around the world all came back to the one level. When COVID happened, I was on midnight calls every second day. Unfortunately, I go through the short straw. New Zealand's halfway between US and UK or Europe. They were in there during the daytime, we were right in the middle of the night. So I was up every night. And hearing what was happening around the world, we were panicking, thinking, what the hell is going to happen in New Zealand? Every country was doing exactly the same. Many country governments were talking to each other. With what we were able to do, we were able to predict a lot of things that were happening. When we got out of COVID, not only did New Zealand's market go out of control, everywhere in the world went out of control. So we're not experiencing something new. Well, we're experiencing something new, but it wasn't just for us. Everywhere in the world has done it. But I suppose what is happening is I've been on the Global Advisory Board for Leading RE now for many years and just got appointed as the chair. So it gives me an insight to what's happening worldwide, and I believe that New Zealand real estate is actually in one of the best positions because quite often we are the leader in various changes. And I congratulate everyone that's involved, from government through to the people that are in the industry. So where to from here? Well, if I had that trying to me every time, if someone asked me what's going to happen and I got $1, I think I'd be a rich person because I get asked it day in, day out. But there's a few topics before I give you the answer to that I do want to cover. And it most probably is affordable housing. You know, we talk about foreign buyers, but we also need to make sure that we protect our first home buyers, New Zealanders. We need to make sure we're looking after the Ma and Pa investors. But affordable housing has been a big issue for many years. It's not something new. In fact, in June 2013, and Simon, I think you might have been down in Parliament at that time, I spoke to Parliament at a luncheon that was put on, and they asked me to talk about housing. I'm just going to go through just a couple of the points that I raised there, because it does come home to set the scene. Let me set the scene of the realities of the Auckland housing market. The majority of people buying houses can make current situation work for them. People can and are prepared to pay current market prices, and still do today. The reason is that while we talk about houses, people talk about homes. A home is more than a house. A home is a dream, a lifestyle, a place where the home grows, a neighbourhood where the children go to school, and where communities are formed. And people are prepared to make incredible sacrifices to secure the home of their choice. Another factor not often spoken about, but where the subject of increased prices comes up, is the changing size of homes we buy. When I look back at my father's time in the 60s, the majority of new homes being built in Auckland were for housing corporation assisted first home buyers, who in those days had to be married. The cap on the size of the loan meant that the typical new house in those 60s suburbs of Glenfield, Te Atatu, Blockhouse Bay, Mangere, Otara was 75 square metres for a 3-bedroom house and 85 square metres for a 4-bedroom house. Today, the Auckland Council records show that in the last 10 years, the average size of a new dwelling has increased by 50% and is now 220 square metres. Most of the homes built in the past 10 years, remember this is back in 2013. Now those figures are even more. But in the last 10 years, homes, 10% of them have 5 bedrooms. How many of them are utilising all 5 bedrooms? In Australia, where the economy is starting to enter a tricky patch, Sydney and Melbourne house prices have risen 4% in the last year. So again, we're not different to many of these other major cities in the world. I think what we need to be really conscious of is some of the suggestions. Some of the suggestions I gave back in 2013. And when I walked out of that luncheon, I did have a couple of the political parties come up to me, because this was all political parties that I spoke to. One particular party came up and said, "Good points, well done, can we have a copy of your speech?" that I was very willing to give. One party, who remain nameless, but are not currently running the country, said, "You don't know what you're talking about, and thanks very much for coming." And I felt really, really happy with that. But it was quite significant by the end of their term before they were thrown out. So it might give you who I'm talking about. They actually started implementing some of the things that we said. The first suggestion that I believe that we had to look at was, I believe today, and I still believe it, that both central and local government, regardless of political persuasion, should be able to get together and reach a consensus that is going to help property for first home buyers for the future. We need to be working together on this, because until we get a 4-year term or a 5-year term, the political scene goes in, out, and there's no continuity. And I believe that that's something that we do need to look at. My second suggestion is, do not underestimate the impact that the current regime around planning and consents and housing costs. Building consents, I've just built a property down on the Coromandel. It was just over $1 million. My council consents and building consents were just over $123,000. Nothing to do with the housing, but that is what the council took out of that just one project. The costs are getting incredible. It's adding on to the overall cost that people are then having to pass on, especially with the developers and the building constructors. I look at a new building that we've just launched in Tamaki Drive this week. This average cost is just $4,000 per square metre, is what the value of that property is. When I look at China, it's most probably around about just under $1,000. When I look at the US, it's around about $1,800 a square metre. When I look at Australia, it's about $2,500. We're $4,000. And that's the cost of our building. We need to be able to bring the cost of our building down, and I'm sure many of the builders in this room would agree. Planning takes too long. And again, I've got to congratulate the government with the proposed changes that they're looking at, because it's going to make the speeding process of consent and the construction so much quicker. And again, we're in the right direction there. So congratulations to the government. And then the third suggestion is, we need to be able to help first home buyers get into property. When I look at first home buyers, I have a look around the world, and there's so many different schemes. I was in Brisbane just last week with the Blues, and of course it's their political time, and voting, I believe, tonight or today. But it was interesting seeing all of a sudden the urge of what they were going to do for first home buyers. New Zealand, we have a first home scheme. We only need 5% of deposit, and then Kangaroo will underwrite the loan. We've got the tenant home ownership grown by Kangaroo, maximum of $20,000. We've got Kiwi Saver, first home withdrawal. Half of that's been gone through Mr. Trump and his tariff movement. It's amazing how many people with that have been affected, where they have bought a property unconditionally, it's not unconditional, due to settle in 6 weeks' time, but their Kiwi Saver has been slashed, and now they can't raise that extra money. The banks won't give it. Mum and Dad are most probably lent, as much as they can. And how do we settle on that property? No fault of the first home buyers. It was just through what happened with the terrorists that the Kiwi Saver dropped, and it is a concern. Hopefully that will correct itself very quickly, but it is something that we do need to look at, is what are the restrictions on Kiwi Saver. When we look at Australia, they've got various first home grants, very similar to us, but they're only up to $10,000 they do. $10,000, where's that going to go? Canada have got different programs, from a rent-to-own scheme, And I do believe that when I talked in 2013, when I first started in real estate in 1981, there was a rent to buy process. And many of those people have gone on to own not only one property, but now own 3 or 4 properties because they got a foot into the ladder. And I think that's something that we do need to look at seriously, is rent to buy. Germany have gone different again. They're just going through a real difficult time in housing at the moment, but they're now just launching a housing offensive, which is a suite of policies, including increased funding for new social housing and close-cost rental housing. And Ireland, who's much of the most progressive of the lot, are additionally adding in packages including tax subsidies to help first home buyers towards their first down payments. So there's a lot happening around the world that I believe our people, our leaders, our ministers need to be looking at, saying what is happening for the first home buyers and how we can help them. They're the critical ones that need the help. When I look at the Ma and Pa, mum and dad leaders, they're now number 3 in the most mortgages. You've got 2 banks that are in the mortgages. Number 3 in the ranking is mum and dad buying. And that is a big part of New Zealand that we cannot afford to lose. That's the doom and gloom. Where are we going? We talk about the housing. There's that golden crystal ball. This is the answer to where we are today. And I'm happy for you to take photos of that if you want. I believe we are at between 22 and quarter 2. If we have a look at the real pit of real estate, that's right down at the half-hour mark. That was the worst part. I believe we're beyond that. But I think where we're starting to see, we're just still seeing the falling interest rates come in at the 25-2. Rising share prices are starting to come back. If we just take out the one incident. And somewhere between the rising commodity, between 8 and 9 is where we are at the moment. By the end of this year, when we've got the fixed interest rates released a little bit more, we'll start seeing rising overseas reserves. We'll get the investors coming back into New Zealand, and hopefully by the end of this year or early next year, we might see some foreign buyer movement. And I'll just finish with that in a minute. But I believe we're, by the end of this year, we'll be somewhere around about the 5-2 mark, which means that the next 2 years, we're going to be in for some very good real estate for everyone. I do say word of caution though, we can control what we can do, but the international market also has a big play in it. And with world wars, etc., what is going to happen with Russia and Ukraine, who knows? What other incidents are going to come up, who knows? But if we just look at what we do well here in New Zealand and do it well, I believe we're in for some exciting times in the coming year. The one thing I will say is foreign buyers, because I know many of you have already asked me to talk about that. I believe that, I do know that the government are working on it, and I believe they're working on with the right way. We can't go back to where it was. There has to be some controls in place. But Minister Stafford said there would be a certain, possibly a ceiling of where it's going to be at. I agree with that, but I do say that the amount they're looking at needs to be probably a little bit more flexible, so it's not just going to be an Auckland base, but it'll be throughout the country. But I also believe that we need to tie in some of the investment money that we're trying to bring in for overseas with all these businesses to be part of that deal, so we can move up and down the country depending on the values of properties to make sure we spread the investment evenly through the country. I also believe that with the foreign buyers, where I live in Riviera at the moment, I've got 3 houses backing onto me which are vacant. Foreign buyers. that does nothing for a community. So I would say that we somehow need to put some form of restriction on land banking and make sure that if people want to buy here in New Zealand, they live here and they commit to being part of New Zealand. I think with these sort of things, we can have so much better. We can protect our first home buyers, we can protect our ma and pa investors, we can prevent the developers, but more importantly, we give an opportunity for offshore people. Being overseas so many times, I get asked, I'd love to come to New Zealand, but I can't buy the property. It's not just about the business owner who wants to come here. They want to bring their staff, their colleagues, and they don't want to be renting either. They want to own and buy property. And they should have the right to buy property if they're going to live here. So that's my feeling on the foreign buyers. I hope we see some movement within the next 6 months because we're losing a lot of opportunity. It is interesting that Australia have gone to a similar ban to where we are now, and Canada have also done it, and now they're wishing they hadn't. So hopefully we'll see some movement, and we're not just the Chinese coming in, we've got people all over the world wanting to come to New Zealand because it's a wonderful place for us to live.